This is Crossing Phase, podcast with a Christian and a Muslim talking religion and politics. And we record on this day, September 11, talking about 9/11. I and my friend John. Welcome back, John.
How you doing, man? It's a somber day, and it is completely by accident that we're doing this because we were going to record yesterday.
Yeah,
and we
kind of a fluke of the schedules, and then we get on the line today. And we're like, oh, it's 9/11. Let's talk about it. What should we talk about? So I think we should talk about it, and I think you.
Yeah, we should. And I was, my text to you was, you should hammer me. Just hammer me. This is the moment where you could sit there and be like, all right, let's talk about 9/11 in the context of Islam and the community and all that other good stuff. I mean, we're also on the heels of Ashura, the Islamic New Year, which happened yesterday on the 10th.
And you talked a little bit about that on the last episode.
Yeah. So it's we're in the middle of Muharram. It's the tail end of Muharram, which is the holiday that mourns the Battle of Karbala. So it's because the Muslim calendar moves.
Right. So this is not a frequent thing necessarily. It just happens to have aligned this time with 9/11.
Yeah. And 9/11 is just, right now Washington, that closed 495 down. There's a big event around the Pentagon. Of course, the president spoke this morning. And so DC is somber. Although I'm not in Washington right now. I'm in New York. So I'm at my parents' house, and my mother is asking me to sort through the coats.
Sort through the coats. Yeah. It's almost that time of year, huh?
She says the closets are too full, so sort through the clothes. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to get on the podcast. It's 9/11. Let's do this.
A little bit of pre-fall cleaning.
Yeah.
So, good. Well, I naturally, it goes without saying, 9/11 changed the course of history, both domestically and internationally, and clearly in the affairs of U.S. government and foreign policy, and also how Americans relate to American Muslims. Not only American Muslims, but Muslims beyond, right? I think there's an unfortunate but now kind of direct connection in the minds of people when they think Islam, when Americans think Islam. We're still 18 years past that attack, and American Muslims are still dealing with the aftermath of that. And I think you have a compelling story to tell that you have told bits and pieces to me years ago. You're a New Yorker and you're an American Muslim, and I figured it'd be an interesting time to reflect on your experience and the experience of your family. But I know that's it's kind of a minute picture. We're talking about big picture kinds of things too on this podcast. So where do you want to start? What do you think? It's 9/11. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a somber day, and I was just talking with my good friend who is a service buddy, and that is an Eastern Orthodox priest, and he's coming up on 495. He goes, I don't know why it's closed. I go, it's 9/11, buddy. He goes, I say, you at Pentagon right now because it should be closed, and he goes, yeah, it's closed. So, yeah, it's admittedly 9/11 in its the event itself. I was just talking with my mother about it. I go, the day before on the 10th, I had never been to the Twin Towers, and I never been.
Yeah.
I don't do a lot of business in New York, and my first 10 years of my career was international development, working with it on the industry side and with the Department of Commerce. So I never was. As a New Yorker, Twin Towers, never had a reason to go down there. But the day before, on the 10th, I was there. Wow. A guy blew me off for lunch at the Top of the World restaurant.
Huh.
So that's it. I was based in Vegas at the time, went home to Vegas that day. And then the next morning, all the business happened. So I think that my sister was working in the city. She was working at Sherman Sterling. She was a Tulane law grad,
Uh-huh.
and she wasn't downtown, but she was running for her life that day, or everybody thought that they were running for life. She was, I think, closer to Midtown, but they evacuated the building. She was walking across a bridge,
Uh-huh.
and it's really her story. It's really my brother's, my in-law story.
Yeah.
That's just really compelling because I didn't. It didn't. I've always done national security stuff. Always support national security interests, but I was not involved, not there, not. It didn't affect me the way I think other people affected other people who were there, and then
Uh-huh.
obviously the community, the Ummah. So sister was running for her life that day. It took a little while for us to find her, a couple weeks, I think, to
Gosh.
find her, and she was fine. She was healthy, but all the comms went down.
Right.
Um, and then so she started processing death certificates pro bono. Now she worked for one of the top law firms in the world, and she was processing these death certificates pro bono, and something happened. She just said, "Why all these people were killed protecting the money of the wealthy, the
Oh.
money of the rich,
Hmm.
and Islamic terror." And I'm hedging on that term because these guys are
Sure.
these Wahhabis are anti-colonial movement. It's a political movement. It's
Yeah.
it's not even political Islam. It's using Islam it's politicizing Islam and then using it as an excuse. But really, these guys are just disruptive anarchists.
Yeah.
And so, and they just want global rule. And until they get that, they're just gonna fool around with everybody's lives.
Uh,
And so, and there's also a business behind terrorism.
right.
Ask me the story about when I sat with all the jihadis in Afghanistan. So, self-incriminate my self-incriminating statement. But anyway, the point is that so she was processing these death certificates. Something happened. Tulane law graduate, recruited by Sherman and Sterling, working and one of the top law firms in contract law and corporate law, tax law. And she said, Enough's enough. I'm going to follow my dream."
Uh-huh.
She left, went to India, and so sort of she calls it a self-imposed exile, and started producing music and Bollywood films.
Uh-huh.
And the net result is Vajra. She is Vajra Temple now, and the music that we use
Right.
uh,
The bumper music.
is bumper music. Yeah, I don't know. So it shows you how much I don't know. The bumper music is my sister.
Yeah.
So but it was a long journey for her. I mean, imagine going to Fordham University, going to Tulane Law, then getting a job in a top firm, and then having this idea of you're running for your life. I mean, my sister's story is she remembers all the smoke and all the debris, and no one knew what was happening, and she remembers walking backwards because if something was going to happen, she wanted it to happen. She wanted to see it coming.
Wow.
So, and there was refugees that day. Everybody was hitting what we call BNT, bridges and tunnels,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get the hell out of the city because no one knew what was really going on. It was an Independence Day, meaning that movie type of situation,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
With I can't remember that. What's his name? That guy.
It's just chaos.
The Fresh Prince.
Yeah.
Yeah, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Will Smith.
Yeah, Will Smith.
Yeah.
Terrible. I don't know how he keeps getting work. I have no idea. All right, so. But it was that type of situation. So it changed her. She went sideways, and now she's Hindu.
Hmm.
When I come from a multi-faith family, so the religions we swim in these waters back and forth, and I have one foot in this sort of ancient world with my grandparents, my great grandparents. So that's why I'm Ismaili, right? And then, but she shifted into this to being Hindu.
Yeah, out of Islam into Hinduism,
she had already been. I think she had already been non-religious, I think in general, I think that her I make no bones about my multi-faith background. My father and my mother and father are Christian. They indigenize themselves to the world that they live in, right? And my great grandfather parents, they passed away when I was 10. They tie to the old world. And influenced me. And while my parents were hustling, first to get their college educations, I was with my grandparents, and that's why I have this tie to the old world and why I embodied the sort of Ismaili faith. My parents, though, my father was able to get his education through the Catholics. He
Yeah.
was he essentially comes from the ghetto of the Bronx,
Uh-huh.
and the Bronx of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where it was all gangs. It was, under siege, fight to go to school, fight to come back. And the Catholics gave him his out, and he became a Catholic brother,
Yeah.
a Marist brother. And for 7 years, no, maybe it's 9 years, 7 or 9, thereabouts. And so that he's always just sort of espoused that faith, but he's sort of a cultural Catholic now, and my
Uh-huh.
mother is too.
Yeah.
Although my mother will bury statues. My dad was so. St. Anthony, I guess if you lose things, you got to bury it
Oh, that's beyond my knowledge.
upside down.
That's a thing.
And so the problem is that my mother's been doing it all these years. They start to surface when my dad's mowing the lawn, and now they're it's fooling around with the tractor, So I don't know,
Oh,
I don't know
no.
if that, So there's so my dad's got an issue with that with St. Anthony right now.
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah, it's just I don't know. So
Huh.
but
Maybe is it Saint Joseph? I'm just looking it up real quick. Interesting.
I don't I want to say St.
Oh,
Anthony
that's
if
the
something's
cell.
lost.
Okay, that's the cell your
Uh,
house.
so yeah,
Oh
but
my
if you
goodness.
lose
All
something,
right,
if something's
moving
lost,
on.
it's
Yeah,
St.
yeah.
Anthony.
Okay.
And then the other one is the one I always joke about is Saint Dimphna. I go, has anybody? It's like Dimphnia. She's the patron saint of mental illness.
Uh,
And those I know those two. Because my grandpa, my father would always say that the difference between the Pinna family and everyone else is we know we're crazy and we admit it. Everybody else thinks they're sane. So I think so my sister, she had a profound religious and professional religious and social epiphany
uh-huh.
that where she knew she had to stop what she was doing and transition into something else. Now, my Ali, my brother is in the film industry. He looks like a terrorist. He wears jeans and he wears what does he wear? Like a combat jacket, like it's called the M65 jacket, like the Vietnam warrior jacket. He
Uh-huh.
just looks, and he's browner. He just looks like a
Uh-huh.
terrorist.
Uh-huh.
And the problem is, I just remember sitting with him, and he's a New Yorker. I remember standing with him on the platform, and it was like the two of us, and then everyone was. I'm talking about the subway platform, was all the way on the other side,
Yeah.
like all the way.
Uh-huh.
And it had a huge psychological effect on him. Huge
Yeah.
psychological effect. I mean, I wear now the dopey. I wear my suit and tie. I'm trying to figure out a way to wear a suit without a tie, but I was
especially in August and September.
well. When I tried, when during the Obama regime, the Obama administration, it was July, and it was
Yeah.
just DC hot,
Yeah.
Africa hot, DC, we were at the White House and talking with Obama, and I just said, listen, man, why can't you just do that like Filipino tuxedo, that shirt with the lines on it? Just wear one of those in the summer, and it'd be so much better for us, and then we could all start wearing those and relax, and his
The
typical
the
his
Kubavera
typical
shirts. Yeah.
yeah, one of those. His typical thing goes, John, I'll take it under advisement. It's a good idea. And that's my impression. I don't know if it's accurate. And I was always so excited. I came out and I go, God, that if I could get that one win, my whole
Right.
career would be it doesn't matter about USURF and all these other things that I've done. I'm like, if we could just break from the suits in the summer.
Capitol Hill staff would build a monument to you, John, if you made that
Oh,
happen.
like if Trump's listening, just tell him it's relaxed wear in the summers.
Yeah.
Why can't we just do that?
Yeah.
I mean, what's
I'm
the
with you.
why are we so passionate? So, anyways, he I was in business the first 10 years of my career, so I wasn't swimming heavily in national security issues unless it was related to tariffs and all kinds of other stuff, exchange of products. But he really did, affected him for years and years and years. He became more rigid, became more fundamentalist, became
Uh-huh.
more embedded in his religion. It wasn't until he fell in love with a Christian that
Uh-huh.
he all of a sudden started to hedge on, wow, like I need to be a little bit more broader in my thinking, even
Interesting.
though I've had all this stuff happen for 9/11,
Sure.
and even though people are really mean to me, I have to figure out a way to sort of bridge the gap myself as this in his like personal journey. But he was not, I mean, I say fundamentally, he wasn't a terrorist. He wasn't doing any stuff, but he found his refuge at the mosque. He found his refuge
Right.
praying. He found his refuge in isolation
Yeah.
rather than with the larger community. Me, on the other hand, it was the 2008 2009, and the subprime mortgage hit. I worked for the National Association of Home Builders, and I lost everything in the crash. And for a brief period I lost my house, lost my business, lost everything. And uh and I had to rebrand myself. And my mother is the one. She says, you're a master at multi-faith. You have all this ability. You're the sort of approachable from a faith-based
Hmm.
component. Why don't you get into international development? Why don't you figure out what's going on at the Department of State? And that's when I joined AIC, the American Islamic Congress. That's when we met.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll build up this idea of being an approachable Muslim, translating Western concepts to collective cultures in Islamic context. And
Uh-huh.
and uh, and that's how we started collaborating. That's how that was got involved in the International Religious Freedom Roundtable in 2009, 2010, and then the rest is sort of history, is sort of getting involved in all this other stuff. But for 10 years, my in-laws, their house was stoned.
Gosh.
And this is not in Kentucky. This is in Hyde Park, New York.
Uh-huh.
The neighbors used to come out every day, and they used to, Hyde Park, New York, stone the house.
Goodness gracious.
And when it was every day for the first 5 years. Then it would be sporadic. Like every Friday, it'd be like a big jamboree, and everybody would do it. We call the cops, and what the cops would say, well, they're on public land. And I go, but they're stoning the house. And they'd say, well, so the Hyde Park Police, the state troopers, and the sheriff's department all just did nothing.
Nothing.
The cars, they would actually drive up and sit and stand there and make sure it didn't get out of hand, but they'd let them do it. And
I
you know
that,
my
that's unconscionable.
Oh, I used to sit on the Civil Rights Division with Eric Treen and Holder and all these guys. And it's like, I don't think they realized what it was just difficult because you couldn't, there's these personal stories reporting and stuff like that, but they just let it, I was not only let it happen, they stood by watching it happen. And then, like I said, my in-laws, the one sister, she completely rejected Islam. I mean, their head coverings were ripped off,
Hmm.
in school by
Wow.
by classmates,
Jeez.
and people did nothing. So it's just, there was and what I mean by nothing, it was just, what's 9/11? It's this and that. It's people are angry, and a lot of this stuff was excused. And it's really, I think the Muslim community in general went through a lot. Now, here I am bitching and moaning, and I'm just gonna say to you, I'm belly aching a bit, but
Well,
I think that,
those are not happy memories, and they were breaches of American civil rights.
yeah, yeah. Well, but there's pictures, school pictures of my in-laws, right? My sister-in-law and laws, pictures of them, and the entire school picture. This is the teachers in Hyde Park let this happen, where the Muslims are to the left and the whole class is to the right.
You're kidding.
No, they have those pictures right now. So, like, the sheer amount of like meanness, and I don't think people understand. These are children.
Yeah.
You know, it's not cool, man. So there's and like I said, I have a lot to say about Hyde Park, but
Sure. But I mean,
you know, so
but no question, your family, your siblings, and your parents were clearly their views today clearly are shaped by those experiences, right? And
yeah, and not so much. And like I said, not so much my family. I don't want to get too much into like my parents
sure,
are fine,
yeah, sure,
but my sister, the event of 9/11 changed her career, changed her social outlook, changed the stuff in her religion to a certain degree. It's really my extent was what my extended family, my in-laws, they're Pakistani, so they're brown,
Uh-huh.
Butterscotch caramel was what I say affectionately, and and they went through a lot,
Yeah.
and as somebody who's into civil rights, into all this stuff, trying to stand up with your chest out, and you're sitting there. What do you do when a cop just is standing there while people are throwing stones? What do you do? And you're like, what is your problem? And
Yeah.
I was like, stop these people. And it's like, the public land, it's freedom of speech. Freedom of speech. Then
No,
you
it's
go
not.
report it. Then you report it to the sheriff's department, and the sheriff's department's like, nah. I'm like, let me talk to the officer of the day, and he's like, I know these officers, they wouldn't do that. They didn't even show up. Then you go to the what's it called, the troopers, and the troopers are like, well, why would you let something like that happen? Why would you do it? Like, it's on me. I go, you guys are supposed to stop people from assaulting people. Well, they're not really assaulting anybody there. I go, it's private property. I go, well, when the stone leaves their hand, it's really in what, like, these are
Goodness
these
gracious.
conversations. And
Yeah.
so you go back home and you're thinking, well, I guess I gotta take this into my own hands. Now, here's the problem.
I guess
If
I have
you
to go stand in front of the rock,
Yeah, I got to
right?
stand in front of a
For
rock,
them to do
or I'm gonna,
anything.
or I'm gonna have to uh, uh, go into, take like it said, do I become a vigilante, or do I go out, do I get embedded into the community? And that's part of the problem. I don't think people realized
Yeah.
how much hate there was and why people end up going into becoming isolated from the community, and from the American community, because they are being isolated
Right.
and are singled out and are being identified. I mean, these are your classmates. These are people that knew my in-laws' family, that knew everybody.
Yeah.
They went to school with them. They, lived on their block. They read the same newspapers. They did all. My mother-in-law was worked at the Dunkin' Donuts. Everybody knew her.
Yeah.
She poured coffee for the entire town, and everybody knew her. And so it wasn't like she was a stranger, or like they were immigrants,
Yeah.
they were this, that, boo, boo, boo. No, they knew she was the Pakistani lady that would wear the cultural clothes
Uh-huh.
and serve the coffee with the smile, just joke around and do stuff. And then you imagine overnight you have there's nobody's, it's my rule, my family, nobody's your friend.
Gosh. Yeah.
And then there's aggressive. So I don't know. I mean, I understand why people went the other way, and into why Muslims kind of have gotten during that period. There's an article in the Religion News Service right now about it's like I don't know. It's the 9/11 timeline, that project that traces underlying Islamophobia and the war on terror. And I don't know. I mean, there's three things. It says 2005 torture, and then it says
Yeah.
2015 surveillance, and then it says 2019. There's something, I don't know what this says. I'm
Yeah.
trying to figure out what this is. It says Dominique Rey's execution or something. Look, the pictures that they're showing in RNF, they're like of combatants.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We're not talking about.
Kind of maybe a missed opportunity to show what happened to American citizens.
Yeah, I think, like, if you're talking about Islamophobia is a domestic issue. The term, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to Islamophobia, global Islamophobia, I don't know if it's the term fits that. Islamophobia has a very specific meaning in America. If you're not, anybody can try to indigenize themselves to the 9/11 attacks, but the reality is, unless you're American, I don't think you get it.
Yeah.
So that's number one. You can jump on board, but I don't think you get it.
Yeah.
So that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two is, Islamophobia in our country means something. It means a break in American values. It means that instead of being the land of the free, home of the brave, founded on the principle of religious freedom, it means we're going to start building the Christian narrative harder and faster. And guess what? If you're Muslim, you're a second-class citizen now. I used to have this thing called the Witness series. And the Witness series, I feel like I'm talking too much on this one. But
That's right. Well, I think you have. I would interrupt you, but like I think you have an important story to share that isn't frequently heard by my evangelical friends. And so I woke up this morning and I see most of my evangelical friends, many, posting their recollections on 9/11. And I have my own, I remember where I was and what I was doing, and watched the second plane fly into the tower on the news. And I was in Nashville, Tennessee for ERLC trustee meetings, and, airports were shut down. And so staff was scrambling to basically book as many rental cars as possible for the trustees who needed to travel to get back home. But as dramatic as that was, I think there are a lot of folks in my orbit who haven't necessarily heard a story like yours. So I'm on this episode in particular, kind of content to sit back and hear some of your thoughts.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, like I said, my family was not my family indigenized themselves to America. We're Christians, that my parents are, I'm Muslim because I was tied to, like I said, my grandparents and my great grandparents. So we didn't really and I was in business. So that really didn't hit us. My in-laws, certainly. Once I joined AIC, the American Islamic Congress,
yeah,
forget about it. I used to do this thing called the Witness Series, and it was shared persecution. So a Muslim and a Jew, a Muslim and a Sikh, a Muslim and some other faith groups, and we would talk about shared persecution. And I remember talking with Hans Deep Singh, who's a lawyer, part of the Sikh community, and I shut down an airport. So it's Stuart Newburgh Airport here in upstate New York, and I was, my parents are in Poughkeepsie, and so I was, it's like the dark side of the moon.
But it's a fun name to say, Poughkeepsie.
Poughkeepsie, it is. It's a American Indian name, so it means a bend in river or deep part of the river or something like that. Anyways, beautiful Hudson Valley, seat of the American Revolution, wonderful place. So French and Indian War. The Dutch History 1604 patent. So these are all plugs.
Sure. Yeah.
Catskills. Awesome. All right. So,
well, I have a distant ancestor who's buried up there somewhere.
It's a
story for another time. So I know you're still searching for it.
I did take a day to go try to find your ancestor up in Columbia County. The challenge was, like I said, it gets a little bit sparse up there.
Right.
And there was, I think I told you, there was an ice cream place, a soft ice cream with a peacock. Literally a peacock, not somebody who was just, and I was like, we got to stop. I don't know what's going on. And I was with my best friend and I was like, I don't know what we're doing here, but I don't know what's happening. But let's get some soft ice cream from the farm and look at the peacock. So, and then we were like, what are we doing? And I completely got off the rails. So I apologize.
You're distracted by ice cream and a peacock.
So I think
plausible story, John. Sure. Whatever.
Sure. Okay. No, in Hudson, New York, right near Martin Van Buren's house, there's an ice cream stand there on the corner of Route 9 and 9G, 9 and 9G. I think it's 9A and 9G, and right at that crossroads, there's a stand there, and it's like some guy's house, and they have like a little stand, and he has peacocks. How cool is that?
That's very cool.
Yeah, like I don't know. I guess I'm easily distracted. Don't ever go on a car ride with me. If it's a 3-hour car ride, we're stopping 20 times. I'm like, pie. Maybe it is the world's best pie. Let's stop. So, it's totally ridiculous. So, what's the story? So, yeah. So I don't know what we're talking about. What were we talking about? See, America. Oh, the airport.
The airport.
So it was Stuart Newburgh. I had my Mustafa beard, and I was getting on the plane, and I had gone through security. Sat in the waiting for the plane for an hour, then boarded the plane. Minding my own business, doing my own thing. Troopers come on the plane, yank me off. See, this the guy. Now imagine they come on board and they go, "Is this the guy?" Everybody on the plane's looking. They grab me, pull me off. I so I start walking with them through the airport. It's a small airport. And I say, what's going on? And I said, am I going to make my plane? And the trooper says, you're not going to make anything. And I go, so do you want to tell me what's going on? Do you not want to tell me what's going on? So I get all the way back to the security. Security's held up. All the people are held up at security. There's one security checkpoint. And they start going through my stuff. And the trooper says, I go, what is going on here? Someone needs to tell me. And they go, you had a knife in your bag, and when someone told you to stop it, you ran. So I go, okay, let me just start right there. Number one is I don't run. Number two, you're saying that someone accused me of a knife, I ran, then up the escalator, because there's escalators right there in the stairs, then sat for an hour, then boarded the plane, and you guys weren't cracking the case. You guys were on the hunt in the airport the whole time looking for me while I was sitting there. I go, look, if someone ran from this checkpoint, everybody be on you. I go, so this is a lie. And essentially what happened was there was a good cop, bad cop, and the good cop was saying, well, we have a lot of people here that are a little bit antsy about Muslims. And I go, well, how do you know I'm Muslim? And they just blew past that comment.
Sure.
And said, well,
Yeah.
is like no one wants to be, culpable if a terrorist gets on a plane. So I said, so because I have a beard and I look Muslim, you guys pulled me off the plane, accused me of something that didn't happen, and now I'm stopped here. And my arms are out. And was the conversation I had with Hansdeep Singh at this event called the Witness Series. I'm standing there with my hands out. And all I could see is everyone backed up in security. And this little girl, and I don't know how old she was, but she was like waist high, is crying. And I make up the story that she was going to like Disney World. And all she knows is a bearded man is stopping her from going to Disney World.
Yeah.
They shut the airport down for 12 hours.
Good 12 hours.
12 hours. And everybody was pissed. And then when they released the planes, I was allowed to go back on the plane and fly across the country with the people that saw me being accused of something.
Yeah.
Pulled off. It was a profound moment for me.
Few uncomfortable hours, huh? And that was 2008. Yeah.
2008. And that's the thing that made me make the decision to join the American Islamic Congress and to advocate and to start stuff like the Witness Series. We started this program called oh God, I can't remember what it's called. It was a blood drive during the month of September. And Muslims for Life was called. So we started that with the Ahmadi community. And we would have all over the country, have Muslims during September donate blood. We a lot of thoughtful participation from the community to try to create inroads with the larger faith communities and American community to try to build those bridges back.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of Muslims for Life, and there was a lot of Muslims that participated. There wasn't a lot of other faiths that participated.
Yeah.
Had it up on the website, would promote it. And they're like, I'll use my own blood drive. But, what a great opportunity for solidarity, to show solidarity and unity and do stuff. And so I mean, that was my turning point, was in 2008. It was 8 years, it was years and years and years later, So the challenge was that made me say, well, I got to do something. Maybe I should stop making money. And I left a very lucrative career to join the American Islamic Congress. Was making $50,000 a year, and trying to rally the American Muslim community and the global Muslim community while doing international development and do multi-faith work to try to build those inroads. And I'd say it worked, but to a certain degree. But that was my struggle. It happened years later. It was a really not only uncomfortable, but it was strange. It was just a strange feeling.
Yeah.
And later we got into all this, and it was imagine shutting an airport. I don't go to Stuart Newberg ever now. Yeah. And all Muslims think twice about traveling.
Sure.
All of them. So it's like adverse conditioning. You think twice about getting on a plane, about making your plans, about going to the airport, and because you don't, you have a beard, people are going to say, oh, maybe he's Muslim, maybe he's this, maybe he's that. You might get stopped. I get stopped all the time when I get in the airport. I look suspicious. I act suspicious. I can't help it. Like I'm always confused, disoriented. I'm always, eating two different types of burgers because I'm like, maybe the McDonald's burger is different than the Five Guys. Let's try to, I'm always doing weird stuff when I'm at the airport. So, I'm that has nothing to do with profiling. It has to do with I'm purely look like I'm up to something.
It's why I agreed to do a podcast with you, John, because you're a character.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always looking for something in my bag, and then because I'm like, did I put that in there? Where is that? I get crazy. I'm like, where's my is my passport there? All right, I just checked it. Let me check again. Like I get, so I
Yeah.
look like I'm doing weird stuff all the time at the airport.
Always in motion.
Well, I'm reading a Lenin book right now. There hasn't been a book written on Lenin in 20 years. Imagine that. So I'm
Uh,
reading this book on Lenin, and I was reading on the train. This guy goes, "What are you reading Lenin about?" And I go, "I was a Russian historian. I studied Russian history. It hasn't been a real book around in 20 years." I go, "Because you a communist?" I go, I know when I read, as I said to him, I go, I read a gourmet book, a magazine on gourmet cooking. Doesn't mean I'm a gourmet cook.
exactly.
I don't know what to tell you. Like I can't, like I don't even understand that connection. So, and he was like, "Well, with Putin and election meddling." I go, "Election? What do you?" He's like, "Is
It's a
this
book of,
conversation
it's a
happening?"
history book.
I was like, "I don't even know what this conversation is about." But admittedly, I'm very critical about travel now.
Uh,
Was for a long time because of that experience, and I was like, "I'm not getting on a plane. I'm not going to," and I don't go to anywhere near Stuart Newberg. That trooper, I don't remember his name, but he was a jerk to me.
yeah.
He was, I mean, not respectful, overly. This is the problem. Everybody after 9/11, I love, law enforcement, a lot of friends in law. Biggest thing is they want to catch a terrorist. They want to be a hero.
Yeah.
So that guy was walking tall. He was like, "I got one."
See something, say something, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
That
so,
that can be taken to an extreme, clearly.
yeah. I mean, and as somebody who supports national security interests and is involved in all this stuff, I mean, I get it, but we're not doing a just job of protecting each other when it's only see something, say something with the guy with the beard. When
Yeah.
we got guys shooting up El Paso and Dayton and everybody else,
Uh,
we got, so I just, so anyways, that's my story. Didn't happen a lot later. That's why I do what I do. That's why I make no money. That's why I'm on the
yeah.
podcast with you. That's why I support multi-faith work and try very to make sure that we do what we need to do
Yeah.
to build the bridges between our communities. I mean,
And,
that's why we joke a lot.
yeah. Right. Well, and what is many things interesting to me about that your experience, but in spite of that experience, some of the projects you led, or what you mentioned earlier, trying to communicate Western values, I think you described, into more collective societies. I'd like you to unpack that a little bit, because I think it's important for American Christians to hear a little bit about too. But having seen some of your work, I think you guys used some unique tools from American history. Talk to me a little bit about kind of the big picture of that project, taking Western values and trying to inculcate them into other societies that you called collective societies.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it was Fukuyama. I think it was the author who said Clash of Cultures wrote this book, and he sort of set the stage between this idea of the East and the West,
Uh-huh.
and so they're not they can't work together. They're not compatible. So here's the problem: is that American Muslims, they are compatible. First of all, he was wrong,
Yeah.
and that's number one. And I don't think anybody who's ever been so wrong could become so popular, because he's still referenced and used in international development. If you have an IR degree, an international relations degree from any university, you've read his book.
Yeah.
And I think it reinforces a false narrative. American Muslims are some of the most affluent people in the country. One of the most affluent groups. I did an event called Faith, Money, Power, and it was part of the Capitol Hill Distinguished Speaker Series while I was at the American Islamic Congress, and it's focused on how we have of all the populations, religious populations in the country, we have the lowest pay gap. Some of the most, and one of the most affluent communities, one of the most successful communities as far as economic, social integration and so forth.
Yeah.
Juxtaposed to, like, let's just take the Chinese. The
Mhm.
Chinese don't do that.
Right.
Now, I'm not bashing the Chinese, but there's a Chinatown in every town, and there's people in Chinatown that have never learned English. Let's just start with that.
Okay.
Okay, so the integration, and the Chinese use their own banks. The Chinese use their own community, but they don't really branch outside of that.
Hmm.
So a lesson in integration, right? So when people say, well, Muslims don't integrate, they're not compatible, they're not this, they're not that, I'm going, well, here's another collective culture, China, right? And the Chinese culture is collective in nature, and I would argue that there's more of an incompatibility argument with the Chinese culture and the Chinese population than there is with the Muslims, particularly American Muslims. So we implemented a number of programs that would speak to this. For example, Project Noor, and Project Noor is a college program, 95 campuses all over the country that dealt with social justice issues, multi-faith issues, and then had forays back and forth to DC. 50% of the chapters were opened by non-Muslims. Non-Muslims.
Yeah.
And so it gave us an opportunity to collaborate with multi-faith groups. I think the thing that you're speaking to is really these international programs that we did. So we had programming in Tunisia, Egypt, and Iraq. We had programming in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa. But I think that and that's within the American Muslim community. And I think the problems with the international global Muslim community and the domestic Muslim community are the same. It's participation in government programming. It's understanding governmental process and what it means to be a citizen. And so you can come from a collective culture,
Yeah.
and want still be a responsible and participatory member of society, because the challenge is that when it's a tribal identity or a religious identity, you don't know or understand what the participation in government process is, right? So there's citizenship, which is not just voting, it's knowing your rights and how to advocate for it.
Right.
And then the next step is I want to build an issue-based or constituency-based engagement. For example, human rights is really important to me, or gender rights are really important to me, the rights of women, for example, and participating in building civil society or participating in civil society. And then the third is participation in government, where you either become an elected official or a civil servant or join the military or whatever it is. So we used to do a lot of programming both domestically and internationally, and interestingly enough, they were the same. Participation in government programming, which my Muslim friends hated it because the acronym's PIG, but I would say it's halal,
no.
right? So, so they hated it. It goes back to halal pork, right? So this is halal pork. So
that seems like a self-inflicted wound there, or not?
But you always try to poke fun at nonsense, right? So then the word is not, the acronym isn't bad, but
Sure,
it was so,
sure.
I got so much heat for that. They're like, we're not using the acronym, John. Can't do it. So, in any event, it's a little bit comedy. So, but the thing is that I advocate that Muslim culture has been practicing democracy before anybody else, or as long as anybody else, particularly at the Shura and Jirga level, particularly at the what we call informal systems globally. Everything was one person, one vote, and everything was decided as a collective for the preservation of the larger purpose, right? So particularly in Afghanistan, right? So I have Afghan descent, so a distant family from some. So the Shura and Jirga level there, democracy has been practiced for you. Afghans are probably one of the best and most versed cultures in democracy, and an Afghan democracy is probably one of the most unique and interesting experiments, because the West has a tendency to devalue existing systems within Muslim culture. They call them informal systems.
Okay.
So the Shura, which is the sort of village level, Jirga is the mechanism for formal government participation, quasi-parliamentary, in Afghanistan. The parliamentary system that exists right now is called the Jirga system on the national level, right? And they just took that informal system and formalized it, the terminology, and utilized that in government. And it's a really thoughtful way of merging both worlds. But But the problem with the challenge, I think, and I know I'm dancing around your question. This is what Afghans do, right? They explain rather than answer.
We'll get you back to it.
Is the problem is there's an internal struggle, jihad, in the Muslim community there, and there's the external. Internally, American Muslims have been fighting a narrative that has been controlled by well-funded conservative Muslims that interpret religious text, define what religion is, and tell you how to be a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at AIC, we provided the alternate voice. The American Islamic Congress was the alternate voice for Muslims. And so it was open warfare against these entities. They had a 50-year head start, funded by all kinds of money from the Middle East. Their board members, their founding members, all had ties to all these organizations. I mean, it's really open. It's like MPAC, Muslim Public Affairs Council, ISNA, Islamic Society of North America, CARE, ICNA. Those groups that all existed at that time were at their apex, their high point. 50-year history. There was no other game in town. And if any game did come to town, they didn't have the funding nor the access to the government.
Yeah.
And they would say, you pray 5 times a day, you wear the hijab, you do this. Arab Muslims were always the top of the pyramid, right? They were, as far as like the command and control, Arab Muslims come first, and then all of the other populations come after, ethnic and cultural populations come after that. That's changed now dramatically, but you can't argue with what has happened or what after post 9/11. A lot of these entities are unindicted co-conspirators of 9/11, right, because they had members of the board that were Muslim Brotherhood or affiliated with the Wahhabis and Deobandis and all these other things. Yeah. I think they've come.
So now no one wants to touch him or do business with him or, right.
Well, here's the problem: is that a lot of these entities now are just right of center in the when it comes to being conservative, because there's ISIS and there's the Taliban, and now there's much worse dudes on campus. When I say open warfare, I chose to have our programs speak for themselves and implement programming where I think Muslims should have been the top advocates, for example, for international religious freedom, which is why we led the NGO campaign for the reauthorization of USIRF, the United States Commission for International Religious Freedom. Some of my colleagues at AIC certainly were. It was open warfare and could get a little bit heated in the conversations. Nasser Wadadi, who was our director of outreach during that time, was quite vocal, and admittedly, we were running international programming from 2009 to 2013, and one of our employees, one of the people that we helped train, Dalia Ziada, organized Tahrir Square, which is she's one of the people credited with sparking the Arab Spring in Egypt.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you talk about implementing these programs in Tunisia, Egypt, and Iraq, particularly Tunisia and Egypt. AIC was a core player in pushing that social and political reform. Now, I'm not going to get into whether or not it was right or wrong, because we were really good at being disruptive and creating change. But then when change came, the only people that were adept at governmental process was the Muslim Brotherhood. So then they rocked in there.
Yeah.
So, and which I was always very critical about, making sure we had participation in government programming, but that was a mixed bag, whether the success of implementing those programs, because the U.S. government at that point wasn't funding that. They were funding more social justice and human rights programming. So through programs like MEPI, Middle East Partnership Initiative, and through USAID, and through other bureaus like DRL, Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor at state. Yeah. So we implemented these. We were really good at creating disruption and really good at creating essentially a revolution, regime change, but we weren't good at the next step. And that's not because Islam is not compatible with democracy. That's just because essentially the extremists, Muslim Brotherhood, for example, were more adept at doing it. They've been sitting in prison for all these years, studying democracy and governmental process. These nerds were just waiting to come out And we
Did it,
created an environment that was ripe for them to understand how to navigate these halls of the parliamentary halls and these governmental halls
yeah,
to garner kind of support and gain power. And it's destroyed Tunisia,
yeah,
destroyed them. We're talking about one of the most liberal Muslim countries in the world, and the Muslim Brotherhood now has a heavy presence there. They've rebranded themselves the Ennahda Party, which is now means Democratic Party, and some of their top officials, MP Labidi is a woman there that talks about women's empowerment, and she's Muslim Brotherhood. She's their top operative, female operative in North Africa. During the Muslim ban here in America, she was here visiting and guest of the United States Institute for Peace and Foundation for Democracy and a few other places. So, there's now the lines are so blurred, we don't know who's what and who's who.
yeah.
So I would say that we definitely implemented a lot of good programming. We were only one guiding light and one people. I always say guiding light. Maybe that's too. We were one entity that was trying really hard, and
Right.
we had a lot of support.
You were trying to do something different.
And but when as things expanded to a point where it was like the Arab Spring, more people needed to get on board, and it was very, very difficult for I think a lot of organizations to pivot in that direction because people don't know how to navigate the Muslim waters, And it's not right now. Islamic Society North America, they weren't my favorite organization back in the day. Now, you've got Dr. Syed, who's really trying hard to steer the ship in the right direction, and he's doing very thoughtfully doing that. A lot of people that we interacted with in the past that I wouldn't necessarily be interacting with now have come into a thinking of we need to certainly be more collaborative. And guess what? We're not defining what a Muslim is anymore. We're not going to tell you to be a Muslim. That's very dangerous and treacherous waters.
Yeah.
And so internally, I think the community is going through this renaissance because they're not the only entity in town. There's Muslims for Progressive Values. There's American Islamic Congress. There's 1 Million Voices. There's Across Red Lines. There's much more populated NGO civil society within the Muslim community, and not just the 5 entities that say they represent Islam.
Yeah.
And it's much more diverse now. So I don't know if you need the Johnny P's anymore. I think there's enough groups with constituencies that are doing wonderful things where, the Christian community, to a certain degree, when we had that last conversation about the family, they're just one Christian group. All you guys are vying for their pole position.
Right.
And there's so many of you on so many issues. There's so much chatter that nothing really happens. So I know I mean that affectionately. I mean, of course, stuff happens, but
I know.
But the Muslim community, when 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there was nothing but these entities. There was nobody, and now it's so diverse. And there's, like I said, Muslim for Progressive Values are doing like stuff about climate change and green technology, green living. Muslims that do that, that's very specialized. That didn't exist 20 years ago, never would exist 10 years ago, and now they have chapters all over the world. And it's really a cultural Muslim concept. So it's like Muslims that are culturally Muslim, but may not salat out all the time. They may not be going to the mosque or the masjid, but they have that Muslim identity and they believe in green technology.
Yeah.
Okay. That's just one of their items.
Are they drawing, and I'm asking this because there are Christian groups who do similar things. Are they trying to draw on Islamic theology at all in the green endeavor, or is that something different?
They do, they do use, the problem is that the word un-Islamic and haram is thrown around all the time. I don't know what do you guys say? You guys say it's a sin, or it's when somebody's Christian doing something that's un-Christian.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a sin. I don't know.
There are tiers.
They're
unethical, unbiblical, unchristian, heretical.
Heretical, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So
that would be the extreme.
Look, I make no bones about it. You know what I mean? I'll salat out. I haram out.
Or sometimes what gets left out is stuff that's just extra biblical. or even sub-biblical, right? So it's partially biblical but not fully, or just extra biblical. Like there's no text that you can really connect to whatever issue someone is trying to proclaim or advance. So anyway, I interrupted.
Well, no. I mean, well, that's where Sharia comes in. Sharia is like if you follow a specific book of Islamic law, the idea is that whether it's Sunni or Shia, these books of Islamic law sort of dictate to you. It's really case law. It's in particular in Shia side, it'd be like an ayatollah or imam. Something came to them and they arbitrated over an issue and then they document it, right? So, and the same thing with the Sunni side. So there's multiple Sharias out there because I know a lot of people are nervous about Sharia, and we should have a show on this. But they specifically talk about instances that you can reference. Oh, you want to know what I'm thinking about? Buying a house, buying a horse, and drinking I'm thinking about distilling wine, but not drinking it. There's going to be a ruling on that, for example.
Sure.
So from your sect, and if there isn't, you bring that, and you bring that instance, and they'll arbitrate. I always think of Solomon, cut the baby in half.
Yeah.
So like that type of scenario happens, and then they document it, and that's Sharia, right? That goes in the Book of Islamic Law that's updated every year for each sect, right? Yeah. And
so Sharia is something that very, very basically develops within its own legal cultural context. Is that fair to say? So there are multiple Sharias. Is that right?
There are multiple Sharias. So, like, for example, Sistani, on the Shia side, Sistani has his own Sharia law, and Shirazi has his own Sharia law. They're two different. One's more conservative than the other. There's the Islamic law, Sharia, is still adhered to all over the Middle East, and in many cases, it's still Ottoman law, which is Ottoman law is Hanafi, the Sunni Hanafi sect, and then it differs when Hanafi is too strict to the Maliki, which is another school, another maktab, another sect in the Sunni side. So in Israel right now, there's Sharia judges, and they arbitrate using Ottoman law, which is Hanafi and Maliki.
Yeah,
that's what they do. So, and so that right there is a perfect example of how there's not one overarching Sharia, and Sharia is always subordinate to the law of the land, unless it's outlined in the Constitution, right? I think Pakistan is the only country that says, well, it's just the Saudi, right? It's the Saudis. The Saudis have their own type of Sharia, Wahhabi. They have a police of vice and virtue, and they're ready to just oppress whoever they need to oppress. I've never had a problem there. So I'm saying that not. Yeah.
Getting back to part of my earlier question, I recall you guys, one of the tools you used was, because I don't think it was original to you, but was it a translation of the Martin Luther King story?
Oh my God, yeah.
Like in comic book form?
Oh yeah.
Did I remember that? That was one of the things you showed me early on.
Yeah, the Montgomery story. We should have led. So in the Arab Spring, people were using signs that said "We shall overcome" in English and Arabic.
Yeah.
How cool is that? So, so we took a Montgomery story.
It comes from an American experience.
This entity came up with a comic book on the Montgomery story. So Martin Luther King, the March, and it's a comic book. We translated it to Farsi and Arabic. And then we used it in our social justice programming and human rights programming. So we had a program called Fahim Haki, which means in Arabic, know your rights, for women all throughout Egypt. And we use those comic books to help them know, not like we were talking about participation in government programming, not just voting, but knowing what your rights and how to advocate. And those comic books were essential in doing that. And the translation was essential. And we had very thoughtful players. We had Russell Campbell, who marched with Martin Luther King, work with us on this and advocate for and help us translate, not the translation from a language, but translate Martin Luther King-esque concepts into and deconstruct them. And then we would use our expertise of Islamic culture to reassemble into digestible pieces to collective cultures in Islamic context. And the Montgomery story was one of them. So I think that it was very, very successful because it was not only referenced in the Arab Spring, it was utilized as an operational handbook for the Arab Spring: social justice, passive resistance, and assembly of people, right? That, going out into the public spaces and demanding reform, which is it's not indirect, it's direct link to Martin Luther King and his business.
Yeah.
So if it
He
doesn't
was an American Baptist minister and civil rights advocate.
You have to plug the Baptists, should I just do the Shahada? What do you have to do? Do I need to get baptized? Can I be a pastor? Why don't I be the first Muslim Baptist multi-faith pastor? How about that? I'll pop a baptism on me and we'll just do it.
Pop a baptism on you. See, this is what I'm dealing with, folks.
I don't know what that, just pop, why can't we can do that. And we can, do you guys do the host? You guys do all that business? You guys take the bread?
The bread and the wine? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, bread. Is
it actually wine
juice.
Or is it
no,
juice?
It's grape juice.
All right. Because you guys don't believe in transubstantiation.
Correct.
Which is the blood and the body actually become
actually become
the body of Christ.
Exactly. Yeah. But Protestants don't believe that. So. That's more of a Catholic thing. Okay. Which, oddly enough, well, we won't get into that.
Remember I sent you the article? 69% don't believe in it.
Yeah. Polling indicates the majority. Yeah.
And what was my comment? So are most Catholics Baptist now?
Right. Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. Well, there's more to it than the transubstantiation thing, but there's certainly that population is certainly more Protestant than Catholic on that particular issue. There are other issues like the structure of the church and other things, the authority of the Apocrypha and the authority of the Pope and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like this is a fun show, but maybe it's 9/11, so it can't be fun.
It can't be too fun.
All right, prosperity gospel means that you're gonna.
Well, that's for another show.
That's another show.
That's another show.
So the prosperity gospel.
For listeners, John and I, prior to realizing it was the 9/11 and we wanted to talk about that,
This is days ago. Too. Yeah, we weren't pondering that today or yesterday because I don't want to.
Well, we were looking through Religion News Service kind of stacks of articles, and there were a handful of ones that drew our attention, and some of them included prosperity gospel or news within the prosperity gospel stuff. But I think given our subject matter for 9/11 and John's experience here, I think we'll save those headlines for another show.
Yeah, because I think we should. I just think it's a sexy topic, Yeah. And I because I didn't know what it was. I was like, maybe it's buying indulgences.
No, well, I mean, there's a lot of similarity there. Yeah.
Which is essentially why Martin Luther was against, the Catholic Church, and then ended up going on his own.
Right.
99 points or whatever the hell he was doing,
yeah.
And then and now you guys have a prosperity gospel, which doesn't seem like it's in alignment with Martin Luther and his business.
Right. Yeah, that's right. You're exactly right.
And and would that be haram? Is that a biblical deviation? Is that heretical?
I think.
What would that be?
Yeah, I think it's heretical. The prosperity gospel is something that basically tries to. Well, there are many ramifications of it, but the idea is that your faith, if God's blessing your faith is strong enough, then he will bless you materially in material goods, money, health, and that kind of thing. And so it's taking passages in Scripture which we would understand to be kind of general principles like Proverbs and tries to sell them as something that's true always, right? So if I do this, if I act like this in such a way, then God's going to bless me materially. And that we find to be anathema and well outside Scripture. And then, there are these, things like, financial blessing requires a financial sacrifice, right? So you're prompting televangelists or prompting to people to give money, give this much money so that you can be blessed later with more money and that kind of thing. And so they enrich themselves with people who buy that kind of thing, and they enrich their pockets and live lavish lifestyles with luxury goods and homes and jets and all that kind of stuff. And it's pretty appalling from a little o orthodox expression of the faith, regardless of whether you're Catholic or Protestant.
Yeah, I think all faiths struggle with that identity of, prosperity and success, and how does that catalyze into that humbleness and charity, and identity of being living a life of, I mean, it's not poverty because you're not taking vows of something, but you're trying to. It's weird. It's because we're talking about American Islamic Congress. We're talking about what we were doing and how do we translate Western concepts to these collective cultures. But then in the same respect, when it comes to a religious community, it's a collective culture. Yeah. You're part of a community, and how do you help? How do you interact with, and how do you keep that individual identity while maintaining that larger the larger identity with your religious community? I always kind of say in Afghanistan, when we're doing all kinds of stuff about democracy, it's like no two democracies are the same, much like no two Muslims are the same. So I used to say, and I go, I'll give you an example. The democratic system in America and England are two different systems, and that's the House of Lords is appalling to us. Right. A hereditary body that where these guys can just make laws based on their bloodline is outrageous in America. And as the highest evolution of Brit, as a New Yorker, and we rebelled against all that nonsense.
Right.
And so in America, we would never have a hereditary body, although I think that there are people that are trying to create legacies and dynasties in America. So I think that's there's in Afghanistan, the democratic system. I don't know if I think a highly centralized system is bad for Afghanistan. I think they would have a decentralized federalist system where the government takes care of security, infrastructure, and services, and then it's more like states' rights, like America before the Civil War. Yeah. I think that's the system that would work for Afghanistan, and it would be sort of regional. And there are many reasons for that. There's ethnic regions and religious regions and all different types of stuff going on there that would work better in Afghanistan. Yeah. But
well, and it gets the root of the federalist model, right? Which is a concept called subsidiarity, right? So it's local governing for what's local, and scales up from there to national governing what is national, and tiers in between. And that's going to look different for successful democracy, whether it's in America or Britain or Afghanistan.
Well, and Afghans are the most free people on the planet. As far as I'm concerned, they don't like governance. Afghans love freedom. I mean, they fight for it on a daily basis, and they're struggling right now because of all the stuff that's happening. That was the other lens that we were talking about. We talked about Afghanistan because all the stuff that's happening this week. But I think we're way out time-wise.
Yeah.
So
we're pretty far out time-wise. Yeah. And just one last comment. You talked about the Fukuyama stuff and the difference between East and West, and your point is well taken as far as the compatibility of different people with democratic values and structures and that kind of thing. I think what is important for Americans to hear is, particularly on a subject that's close to your heart and my heart, religious freedom, that is communicated. It's understood differently in a collective culture than it is a Western culture. Because the Western culture, we take for granted the individualistic view of religious freedom and conscience and all that kind of stuff, and things that I affirm as a Baptist and as an American. But when you get into more Eastern cultures, the collective nature of those cultures and society, they consider rights generally and freedom's generally different, right? It's less individualistic. It's more related to family and culture and religious and tribal groups, right? Is that fair?
Yeah,
And,
I
and
think so.
all to say is that I think it's we want to advance religious freedom, but at the same time, you have to figure out what really resonates within a particular culture for them to affirm something like religious freedom or any other civil right.
Well, I mean, just simple thing is terminology. When we talk about roundtables, we do the International Religious Freedom Roundtable. Roundtable doesn't mean anything
Right.
in Islamic culture. So that's why we say you got to use the word Congress. Congress translates well.
Uh-huh.
So Congress translates to a gathering. There's direct words that have the meaning of roundtable in English, right? So
Yeah.
roundtable to us doesn't mean a round table. I mean, maybe it does, but maybe in Arthurian lore. But which I would love to just talk about Arthurian lore if you want, but I'm going to hold myself back on that one. But the idea of a gathering, and that the idea and the word Congress translates much better if you're going to say it's an International Religious Freedom Congress, right? Or it's a Religious Freedom Congress, and then the words religious freedom. It's not a Western concept. It's in Islam. It's just in multiple places.
Yeah.
Right. So, I always use the Pashtuns as an example. If we were going to talk about religious freedom, we would have to take the construct of the Pashtun Mani. The Pashtun Mani is their cultural code of conduct, of moral and ethical code of conduct, and the idea of rights and respecting the other and religious freedom exists in multiple parts of that code. It's not, and if you talk about the religious freedom in the construct of that code, and reference the parts, the multiple parts, the 3 to 5 parts that it's in, they got it. The Pashtun population gets it. Okay, understood.
Yeah.
But if you walk in with international religious freedom is this, and you guys don't have it, we don't see it anywhere, and that's where cultural competency comes from. That's where I think there's people much more well versed than I am in these systems. Although that I've been working with these systems for 10 years formally, 26 years informally, and the challenge is that they just we got that. I think the contextualization is really important. So here's a collective culture.
Mm-hmm.
The Pashtun population is a non-state community, right? That that goes into Pakistan and Afghanistan, and they have their own code that goes back, that everyone embodies, and everyone is executing and utilizing on a daily basis. And if you walk in there and speak their language and speak within the construct of their code, they get it right off the bat. And I think that shows that there's not an incompatibility. It just is a different. It's like translating language.
Right.
It's translating between two different systems.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, I think I know we're way out because I can talk, and I just want to talk about Arthurian lore right now. Honestly, God, that's all I keep thinking about now. All right. So
this has been a really good conversation. I know you felt like you talked a lot, but
I feel terrible. I feel terrible.
Don't feel terrible. I wanted to give you a long runway because I think especially on this day, it's important for folks to hear your story and your heart and some anecdotes about your family and your community. So I thank you for taking the time to share that on our program.
No, I appreciate you. Every day, every time we talk, I appreciate you putting up with all this. But I appreciate your thoughtfulness in this, particularly because it's 9/11, and particularly because we're everybody's, I think, is hit pretty hard this day, and I think that we're not really executing a multi-faith agenda. I don't think it's just that right now the storytelling between the two of us reaffirms our friendship, and how we interact, and the purpose of why we kind of just wanted to get these conversations out. It's we like to get other people to share their stories, about their Muslim, their experience as a Muslim in the country, and maybe they can submit to the website.
Yeah.
And
just go to crossingphase.com and send us contact information.
And I will promise to profile, some of the stories sometime over the next 30 years.
Yeah. Well, at least link them in the show notes and that kind of stuff. But
I don't want to overcommit, so I would definitely do it sometime.
Yeah.
But I appreciate taking the time.
This has been Crossing Phase with John Pinna and Matt Hawkins, podcast of Rolltop Productions. We'd appreciate your review of our program wherever you listen, especially in the iTunes Store, but we're also over at Google Podcast, Overcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and TuneIn. Let us know what you think of the program on Twitter, at MTHawk, at JTPinna, or at Crossing Phase. Music for this episode is provided by Vajra, whose music is available at thevajratemple.com, Spotify, iTunes, and Amazon. Show notes and other information is available at crossingfaiths.com.